In a surprising move, Saudi Arabia has decided to lower its oil prices significantly, but this price cut is only targeted at Asian buyers, leaving North America, including the US, completely excluded from the reductions. This price cut is notable for two reasons. First, it's the first time in 3 months that Saudi Arabia has reduced oil prices, and second, this shift specifically focuses on Asia, bypassing the United States. Given that Saudi Arabia has long been considered a stable and reliable oil partner for the US, the move has sparked curiosity and raised questions about Saudi Arabia's evolving priorities. The most striking part of this announcement is the decision to cut oil prices, but only for Asian buyers. This reflects a growing recognition of the economic power of countries like China and India. Both nations are major consumers of oil, and their energy demands are continuing to grow rapidly. In fact, China and India are two of the world's largest oil consumers. By offering discounted prices, Saudi Arabia ensures that it remains competitive in the region, especially as other oil producers, such as Russia, also target Asia with discounted oil. The rationale behind this move seems clear. Saudi Arabia wants to protect and expand its market share in Asia. The price cuts are aimed at ensuring that countries like China and India continue to rely on Saudi oil for the long term. Additionally, it helps prevent competitors like Russia from gaining ground in these critical markets. By offering discounted prices to Asian buyers, Saudi Arabia is aiming to ensure that it remains the supplier of choice for the growing energy needs of these countries. One of the most significant aspects of this decision is that Saudi Arabia decided not to lower prices for the US, despite the fact that the US is still a major consumer of Saudi oil. The U.S. has significantly increased its domestic oil production in recent years, which has reduced its dependence on imports of Saudi oil. In fact, Saudi oil only accounts for about 7% of U.S. crude imports. Over time, this reduced reliance has likely influenced Saudi Arabia's decision to prioritize Asia, where oil demand is rising rapidly. It's also important to note that the U.S. doesn't necessarily need Saudi oil as much as it once did. With growing energy independence, the U.S. now has alternative sources for oil and doesn't rely on Middle Eastern imports in the same way. Meanwhile, China and India remain highly dependent on oil imports, and their growing demand makes them much more valuable trade partners for Saudi Arabia. These factors likely influenced Riyadh's decision to target Asia with price cuts rather than the U.S. Saudi Arabia's decision is largely driven by economic factors. The kingdom needs to secure long-term contracts and maintain market share in the oil market, especially in rapidly growing economies. By offering discounts to Asia, Saudi Arabia ensures that its oil remains attractive to countries like China and India, where demand for energy is on the rise. This move helps keep Saudi Arabia ahead of competing oil exporters, such as Russia, which is also offering discounted prices to attract Asian buyers. The focus on Asia also aligns with the overall strategy of Saudi Arabia's state oil company, Aramco, and the country's broader economic goals. The kingdom has been shifting its focus toward non-oil sectors to diversify its economy, but oil remains a central source of revenue. By securing a stable and growing market in Asia, Saudi Arabia can ensure that its oil exports continue to provide steady income, which is crucial for funding domestic projects and economic reforms. This decision also fits into the broader strategy of OPEC, Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, of which Saudi Arabia is a leading member. OPEC's primary goal is to control the global oil supply in a way that maximizes its members' profits. OPEC countries have recently eased some of their production limits, which means more oil is entering the market. This increase in supply makes competition between oil producers more intense, especially as demand for oil globally is slowing down. By cutting prices in Asia, Saudi Arabia is working to maintain its market share in a highly competitive environment. As oil producers increase their output to compete with one another, price cuts serve as a way to secure long-term buyers. This is a practical strategy to ensure Saudi oil remains in demand despite increasing competition from other suppliers. The decision to focus on Asia with these price cuts highlights how important the region is to Saudi Arabia's oil exports. China, for example, imports more than 10 million barrels of oil a day, making it one of the largest oil consumers in the world. India's energy demand is also rapidly growing. As these countries' energy needs increase, so does their demand for oil. Saudi Arabia, therefore, has to ensure that its oil is competitive in these markets to maintain its economic position. By offering discounts specifically for Asia, Saudi Arabia is effectively signaling that it sees its future energy trade tied to these rapidly growing economies. The move helps Saudi Arabia solidify its place as the primary oil supplier for countries that are likely to drive global oil demand in the coming decades. Even though Saudi Arabia's price cuts are primarily focused on Asia, they still have an indirect effect on the US and Europe. The US still imports about 7% of its crude oil from Saudi Arabia, which means that any major shift in oil prices can affect US markets. Additionally, US refineries rely on imported crude oil to produce gasoline, diesel, and other refined products. Therefore, the price decisions made by major suppliers like Saudi Arabia can influence gas prices and energy markets in the US. However, Saudi Arabia's exclusion of the US from these price cuts suggests that the kingdom is no longer prioritizing its traditional Western partners as much as it once did. While the US and Europe are still important markets, the kingdom's focus has clearly shifted toward the high-growth economies of Asia. This may also be a reflection of broader geopolitical shifts, where the US's increased energy independence, as well as its evolving diplomatic relationship with Saudi Arabia, may have lessened the kingdom's dependence on the US as a primary market. Saudi Arabia wasn't the only Gulf nation to cut oil prices for Asia. The UAE also followed suit, announcing its own significant price reductions for Asian buyers. This mirrors Saudi Arabia's decision and highlights how the Gulf's two largest oil exporters are aligning their strategies to remain competitive in the Asian market. The UAE's decision isn't just about staying competitive. It also signals that Gulf producers are starting to work more closely together to dominate the Asian market. By lowering prices, both Saudi Arabia and the UAE are ensuring that their oil remains attractive to Asian buyers, who now have more options than ever, including cheaper Russian oil. This coordinated response between Saudi Arabia and the UAE could reshape the entire energy market in Asia. As these two nations work together, they might be able to maintain their grip on the region's energy market and continue to provide affordable oil to fast-growing economies. The impact of Saudi Arabia's decision reaches far beyond just Asia. Lower prices for China and India are a win for their economies, but this creates challenges for other oil producers, including Russia, which now has to compete with even lower prices from Saudi Arabia. Smaller oil producers, particularly those in North America, could also feel the pressure, as lower global oil prices may hurt their profits. For Saudi Arabia, the price cuts are also a double-edged sword. On one hand, lower prices for Asia help keep buyers loyal and maintain demand. On the other hand, they mean less revenue per barrel. If oil prices remain low for too long, this could impact Saudi Arabia's long-term plans, especially its ambitious domestic projects and infrastructure expansion. Lower oil prices could hurt Saudi Arabia's ability to fund these initiatives if the revenue generated from oil exports decreases. Additionally, OPEC's recent decision to ease production limits adds more oil to the market. If demand doesn't rise fast enough, Saudi Arabia could find itself producing more oil but earning less revenue. This is a risky trade-off for the kingdom, as it needs to balance long-term demand with the risks associated with oversupply and low prices. In the short term, Saudi Arabia is betting that Asia's growing energy demands will continue to drive its oil consumption. By lowering prices, it's securing long-term buyers in these markets. But this comes at a cost. If Asia's economy slows down or faces a financial crisis, Saudi Arabia could find itself too dependent on these volatile markets. At the same time, it risks losing its traditional, stable buyers in the West if it doesn't keep up with their expectations. For Saudi Arabia, the ultimate question is whether the strategy of focusing on Asia will pay off in the long run, or if it's taking too many risks with the stability of Western markets. Thanks for watching. If you found this detailed analysis insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.